everyone. My name is Stacy Blakeley. I'm the Executive Director of the Policy Circle, and welcome to the new Full Circle Leadership Series from the Policy Circle. This is a series that's going to dive into the skills that we all need to be more impactful leaders, from personal branding, building coalitions, and public speaking, to today's topic, how to build a compelling case. I want to give a special thank you to the Bowe Stewart Foundation for generously underwriting this program. And thanks to our partnership with Bowe Stewart Foundation, the Policy Circle is equipping more and more women through our Civic Leadership Engagement Program, CLEAR for short. If you want to know more about it, please check it out on the Policy Circle's website. I'm really excited about today's program because we're featuring somebody today that I consider to be a friend, a mentor, and someone I think we're all going to learn a great deal from. So I want to introduce my friend, Vanessa Mendoza. Vanessa is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Kite and Key Media, a nonprofit digital media company that translates cutting-edge research and journalism into digestible media that offers the context necessary so we can all better understand the issues that impact our lives. Kite and Key makes it easy for Americans across the country to get the information in the way that really we want to consume it. Before she was the co-founder of Kite and Key, Vanessa was the executive vice president at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research. She's the former host and director of the Young Leaders Circle, a board member of Intelligence Squared, an advisory board member of Open the Books, and a member of Publications Committee of the Manhattan Institute's magazine City Journal. She's an NYU and Fordham Law grad, and she's going to bring so much insight and expertise to our conversation today. But before Vanessa gets started, I really cannot wait for you to see, if you're not familiar with Kite and Key Media, a video that really showcases why they are so good at building a compelling case.
The presidency is vastly different today than it was in the past. We've changed it a lot over the years. In the earliest days of the country, before we had even written the Constitution, we had a role called president, but the job was literally handling paperwork for the Continental Congress. The first person who held it, John Hanson, described the position as irksome and considered resigning within his first week, which is maybe a thing that more of them should consider. And even when the Constitution was being written, several founding fathers were still not convinced we even needed a president. You probably know Patrick Henry, for example, as the guy who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." But he was also the guy who said, well, we don't actually know what he said because he was on such a rant that the stenographer just shorthanded it as Mr. Henry warned of the president's enslaving America. Which is a little extreme, but you get the idea. The founders were building a free country, and all this president stuff kind of sounded like a king. Which is why they cycled through a bunch of other ideas at first. They considered having the president be chosen by Congress. They considered having the president serve one 7-year term. They even considered having no president at all and having the executive branch run by a multi-member council. Because when you want something done in Washington, you look for a committee. But even after all that fine-tuning, we've still had to make a number of changes over the years. For our first several elections, the guy who came in second for president got to be vice president. And, well, you can imagine how that could have gone wrong. So we changed it. Initially, there were no term limits on the presidency. But then FDR was president for like 80 years. So we changed it. There was even a time when a president might ride out into the field to lead the military. Now, sure, that may have made sense when George Washington was putting down the Whiskey Rebellion, and there were some other presidents who could have probably pulled it off too. But James Madison also turned up on a battlefield during the War of 1812. 100-pound, 5'0" James Madison. So, yeah, we changed that too.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, and thanks for taking a few minutes to watch a snippet from one of our videos at Kite and Key Media. So I want to say first and foremost, I'm so grateful to Stacy, who is absolutely one of my favorite people in the world. But I'm also just so thrilled to be here with you guys, the Policy Circle members and prospective members. I deeply admire the time you dedicate here at Policy Circle and in your own communities. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to get to know some of you today and in future events. So my charge today is to talk about persuasion and how to build a compelling case. This is a skill that we all use all day long. So for example, I used this skill last night to get my children to go to bed. That was successful. I used it this morning to get my daughter dressed. Not so successful, but in all seriousness, no matter where we are putting our energy, whether it's at home or in our office with a team or in a community, we are looking not just to be heard, but to make a change, to make a difference, to express our values in the world in a way that accomplishes something big and important for our families and our community. So today, what I'm going to be doing is taking you through five things that I think about a lot when I'm building a case or advising others. I think these 5 points are often massively overlooked or underestimated in terms of their importance. And I've found it to be these 5 things to be critical components of winning the conversation that you are trying to have. So I'm going to jump right in. The first point is you or me. It's the person who is making the argument. So we're not even talking about the meat of the argument at all. We're starting with who we are. Half of building a compelling argument is having people believe that you are a trustworthy, knowledgeable person worth listening to. Now, of course, you actually have to be a trustworthy, knowledgeable person. You have to start with that. But there are many trustworthy, knowledgeable people who will come to an argument and not demonstrate that they should be trusted. And we have to make sure that we're doing that, because if the person we're having a conversation with doesn't have confidence in us, they are not likely to stay with us as we lay down the facts of our case, as we tell people the why of the argument. So in thinking about this point about us and how we comport ourselves and why we are there are a few things to consider. The first is, what is your particular expertise in the situation, and have you let your audience know what it is? If you can't figure out what it is, it might be a signal that this is not an argument or a conversation you want to be a part of. But whatever it is, knowing what your specific value is and making sure you're clear about it in your own head and in the minds of the people that you're talking to is incredibly important, showing that you have skin in the game. So here's some examples. So if I'm at a work conference and there's a discussion about how to treat employees, I participate because I've been a manager for years and I have experience, and my point of view is being a manager. So I'm at a work conference, another example, and they're talking about how to treat employees. And I say, I'm going to participate because I am an employee. And I think my point of view of how I've been treated in the past is an important thing for the audience to consider. Another example, you're in an education board meeting. Your role there might be as a parent. It might be as an educator. You're in a city council meeting. Your role there might be as a resident. Whatever it is, you have to demonstrate to the audience that you, personally, you have a reason for being there and a reason that they should listen to you. A second important key point under this umbrella of who you are in the conversation is to dial down the temperature of the conversation, not dial it up. When we are engaging in a conversation or an argument or a debate, the person who is calmer and collected will be perceived as more knowledgeable and, in the key point, more reliable. And no matter how critical this argument is to you, usually when we're trying to make a compelling case, it's because it is compelling to us and we feel so strongly about it. But no matter how strongly you may feel, it is critical that you use your personal discipline and control the situation as best as you can. It can be easy to feel that if you are not expressing your fear or your frustration or your anger, that people won't understand how much you believe the thing that you're saying. But in reality, it often works the opposite. You certainly see all over social media and most of the conversations that people are having in politics today, everything is ultra, ultra heated. And we know that sometimes we're trying to persuade somebody who kind of deserves to be yelled at, right? Like maybe they're doing the wrong thing for your community. Maybe it's your kid who is speaking rudely to you. Maybe that person deserves to be yelled at, but remembering that rarely does anything productive come out of a conversation where people are screaming at each other is key. This doesn't mean that we don't express emotion, but the calmer we are in expressing it, the better. Now, if we are dialing the temperature down and not up, two things are likely to happen. The first is your example may set the tone for the conversation. You may encourage other people in the conversation to be calm and to have a really fantastic exchange. And wow, the conversation you might have if you're able to influence it that way. But the situation also may be that you being calm and collected and in control actually makes the person you're arguing with dial the temperature up. And if that's the case, you will look so much more in control, so smart, and so reliable. So either way, it's a win for you. When it comes to any kind of persuasive conversation, you want to seem as the reliable adult in the room. And the best way to do that is to keep your temperature down as much as you can. My last sub point under the you conversation, and this one is really critical, is you should be making your case as if you are talking to a loved one who disagrees with you. And I truly, truly believe, I'm sure most of the people on this call and people in your communities and lives that you deal with all the time, I'm sure we all deeply believe that we should be treating each other with respect in these conversations. But the truth is, I also mean this tactically. As you put together your line of conversation, you need to do it with as generous a nature in mind as possible. Because if you're treating the person across from you like a person that you love or you respect and care for, then the chances of them listening and hearing your argument are massively higher. You avoid talking down to the person, you avoid being passive aggressive, you look for areas of agreement. So all of this idea that you are talking to someone that you love, all of it is the best thing you can do to build your strongest case when we start to talk about the meat of the argument itself. And by the way, be totally specific, meaning don't just think about, hey, this is, let me build my argument as if it's someone I care about. Have a specific person in mind. Trust me, it's so much easier. I mean, maybe, at least for me, I have a very specific aunt or my mom or a friend in mind, and I am thinking about that person, and it helps me sort of discipline myself as I think about how I want to make this argument, how I want to express myself. So those are the 3 points underneath you, thinking about who you are in this compelling argument, establishing your point of view and your expertise, dialing down the temperature, and making the case as if you are talking to a loved one who disagrees with you. Okay, so now going to point number 2. Make sure that when you are making this case and you're trying to be persuasive, you are trying to be persuasive or compel someone to think about a very specific thing, that you are trying to accomplish. And when you do that, consider the context in which you are making that argument. So many times, and you'll see this all over social media, I'm sure it's happening in your personal life all the time, people have an opinion about something and it is quite broad, right? So I think this particular political party is awful. I think we're not taking good enough care of the environment. Whatever it is, it's a broad conversation. But if you are looking to be persuasive and you're looking to compel someone into a certain kind of action, you need to have a very specific and doable thing in your mind already that you are trying to achieve. Without that, you end up in, frankly, a lot of the kinds of conversations we're seeing around the world today, which is basically talking in a circle, people just expressing how much they feel about a situation without actually getting to a specific and actionable goal. So making sure you have something super specific and that it is a doable thing is important. So I'll give you an example that's happened in my own personal life. You know, during COVID, you have children who are out of school, and I was me and lots of other parents were super upset and sad that our children were not getting the kind of education we hoped. We were also understanding it was a complicated situation. I went into a PTA meeting and there were a whole bunch of parents who were very angry at various people who were in charge, and they were expressing their anger. But the thing is, there are rules and laws around, for example, what teachers and principals can actually do. And so going into that conversation and hoping to be persuasive, you need to educate yourself about what the boundaries are in terms of what would be actionable in that situation. And your chances of actually persuading the people who are in charge to do those things are so much higher when you demonstrate that you understand what the limitations are and you have a specific and actionable thing that you'd like to get done. So that is number 2. The third is, and this is really to the heart of Kite and Key Media, the company that I have co-founded and that I run, which is have evidence. What you see today is, and all over media, is opinion. People who are telling you, I feel this way. And even often they'll say, I feel this way because, and they will give a piece of information, but they won't give a source. When you are going into a conversation and you are hoping to be persuasive, you need to bring an army with you. And that army should be evidence, sourced, reliable evidence. A great many things happen from this. The first is people say, wow, okay, the person I'm dealing with is super prepared. They've really thought about this. They consider the sources that you have, whether or not they think that they're reliable. And automatically you've built a lot more trust with the person that you are talking to. But the other piece, of course, is that the person who you are arguing with, they would have had to have done as much as work as you did in order to be able to win that conversation. Or if you're in a town hall type of situation, the folks that you are trying to convince would have needed to take the same time that you've taken in order to be able to really argue you with your point. And so the sort of little secret is, if you actually spend the time backing up your opinion and making sure that it's based off of valuable evidence, if you do that, oftentimes people will say, oh, okay, I thought it was this way, but now you're showing me something I haven't seen before. And I think I might be with you. So having that evidence is critically important. It builds your authority. And that's certainly what you need to do when you're trying to build a compelling case. Okay, so number 4. Number 4, I really find to be incredibly important, which is say in the conversation when you're trying to convince somebody, or in the debate or in the town hall, say what you think the audience or the person is already thinking. Meaning, when you think about the issue you're trying to convince people of or the solution, you should also be thinking about all the various ways they may object. And you should take control of the situation and point it out. Don't wait for someone to say to you, but wait a second, you didn't mention this, or hey, this person's trying to build this rosy picture, but they're not even thinking about this set of facts. You should take control of that situation and actually be the one to talk about it. Acknowledging inconvenient information is important. Unfortunately, when people go into arguments, they too often think they have to present a black and white case. I am completely right, you are completely wrong. But in the real world, that is rarely the case, that things are just super black and white. Most often, there will be at least a couple of points against your opinion. And by being able to bring the audience yourself, not once you've been attacked, but before, through those facts and explain why those facts don't actually break your argument into pieces or weaken them in such a way that it makes the argument not true or important. If you're the one to take the audience through it, you'll have a lot more power in that conversation. And this is another way of showing respect for your audience. It's saying, I hear you. I know that you might be thinking this. And I understand, I'd be thinking that too, but hey, I learned this piece of information, whatever that might be, that helped me realize that that point, while important, doesn't win the day. And here's why. I'm going to explain it. So too often people think, hey, I have got to just put out my strongest points. I've got to say there's only one right way to do it. That's how I win the debate. And what I'm telling you is, more often than not, saying what that person might be thinking in terms of why they might be doubting your argument, saying it, dealing with it, Presenting inconvenient information and explaining why that didn't change your mind will often put you in a much more powerful position in that conversation. Okay, and now number 5, which is when you are building that compelling case, you are always doing it with an audience. It might be a person debating you, a conversation you're having with one person, a group of people. I can see it on a stage in a town hall. Maybe you're being interviewed. One of the key things you need to do is you need to figure out what you have in common with the person who doesn't agree with you or the person you have to convince. There is a reason you're having this conversation. And if you are the person to highlight that reason, the thing you have in common, you will start the conversation off on the right foot and you will remind everybody why you are there. So I love to use the school board conversation. We really care about children. I'm a parent. You're an educator. You've gone into this field because you care about kids. My kids are the most important thing to me in the world. We both care so much about what the outcome is. Now we just need to figure out how we get there. Pointing out the commonality, right, between you and whomever you are trying to persuade is an excellent way of making sure that you are starting the conversation off on the right foot, that you are focusing everybody in on what the ultimate goal is, and you're starting your conversation in such a way that you are not immediately at war with one another, but you're starting it in a way where you think about what matters to you both. So those are my 5 sort of critical things to be thinking about. Of course, there's a much larger universe of things you need to think about when you're trying to be persuasive and making a compelling case. But those 5, while some, when you say them, sounds obvious, are things that I find in my travels are mostly ignored, and particularly in this very difficult kind of hot moment in time where people's arguments tend to get heated and disrespectful. We can be the leaders. We can be the reliable, knowledgeable, trustworthy people in the room, and we have to demonstrate that the best that we can. So with that, I am super happy to answer any questions you may have.
So I love this, Vanessa, and it so echoes, right, our MO at the Policy Circle. That's why our conversations are rooted in Policy Circle briefs and why we're so careful about the facts and the sources, because using maybe non-reliable sources, that's a quick way to lose credibility, I think. And you and I've seen that, right, time and time again. And I also love about it, and I really love that you brought this up, is when you show up armed with facts and good sources, people are like, wow, they did some work. You know, it shows you have some skin in the game immediately out of the gate. So thank you for highlighting those, because that's very important to us. But real quick, before we start taking some questions, one of the things I think you guys do such a good job of at Kite and Key is using humor, right? It's disarming, it's relatable. Talk to me about why you guys, because let's be honest, a lot of policy videos, not so funny, not so entertaining. And what I love about you guys is that makes it so much more relatable. So talk to me, why do you use humor, and how could we translate that into how we engage in dialogue with others?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, you gave a little overview of what Kite and Key does. And I'll just say in short, what we do is my co-founder and I come from think tank research space. And so we love evidence, right? And it's true. It's our bonding connection between Kite and Key and Policy Circle. And so what we do is we go into the 100, 200-page white papers, and we're pulling out the most important information and putting it in a short video so that we can make it as consumable as quickly, easily, memorably consumable as possible. But you are right, we use humor a lot, and it gets to my point about taking the temperature down. Because humor and comedy is a relatable thing. Part of the reason why you find the thing funny is you relate to it. It has something about it, makes sense to you, and it lightens the mood. And we need to do that. We need to do that because otherwise people's defenses are straight up And when they are at their highest is when we cannot find areas of agreement. And so by being able to say, we are not taking ourselves so seriously, we want to find, there's humor in everything, almost everything. And if we can find it and we can sort of bond over that and we can allow the humor to take that temperature down, we think it opens all of these doors that, but for that humor, would be closed or harder to open. So yes, I mean, I encourage it for sure. And an easy way to do it, even if you're not a comedian, I mean, I'm not for sure. My co-founder is very, very funny. But even if you're not a comedian, it's just to understand and not take yourself so seriously is an easy way to incorporate that into the way that you are trying to persuade someone.
Very, very good. And I agree. It is disarming, makes you more relatable. So I'm sorry, I've got some background noise, so I hope that's not coming through too much. But we have a really good question here out of, let's see, where are we coming out of? Tampa, Florida. So in the age of immediate and constant news, social media, and the instant updates, how does Kite and Key stay relevant and timely, but also trying to deliver something that's thoughtful and something that sort of stands the test of time?
Yeah, well, so it's a really great question because it's something we think about all the time. So the problem, we all need news, right? Because we want to know what's happening in the moment that it's happening. However, we are really focused on the public policy implications. And usually you don't know what those are in the heat of the moment. So you will find that we will put out lots of videos that give you background and context for a specific thing that's happening in the news, but that we're not like immediately in this moment dealing with that thing. And the reason that we're not is because we don't want to speculate. We don't want to give you speculation. We want to give you something that you can trust, that is reliable, that helps you understand the world. And so we see it as our role to provide you with context and background so that then you can take what's happening in the immediate moment and you can understand it better. You'll see sometimes we will reflect back on things that have happened that were newsworthy in the moment, but we'll rarely do it in that moment. Like we won't do it within the week or within the month because, gosh, you can see things happen and, you know, a month or two down the road, we have a lot more information than we had in that specific place. So that's why we don't think of ourselves as a news organization. We think of ourselves as a public education, public policy organization. And so we're there to just help you with that context.
Okay, I mean, I think that's really so much though what everyone's hungry for: explainers, context, foundational knowledge. Again, that's part of the synergy that we have with the policy circle with you guys, right? Is we all could use refreshers, right? And how did we get here? So I love when you guys give historical perspective too. We have a great question out of Dallas. And this is kind of a nice segue from what you were just sharing, but how do you take a complex issue, make it easy enough to understand in an entertaining way and not get in the weeds? And I think this is difficult, right? If you're addressing an educational issue, you know, we were just talking about education choice in Texas, right? This is a big issue. It's complicated. And like, how do you get into an issue like that and not get bogged down in like school finance, right? And so how do you guys, or how would you really even recommend to our participants today, if you've got a big issue, how do you prioritize some of those key facts so that you don't get in the weeds?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we do, there's sort of two ways that I think about this. One is part of what I mentioned, which is I always think about who my audience is. And I try to make that person a hyper specific, even though the audience for us is social media and we are talking to, you know, hundreds of thousands of people, and in our case now millions of people. But even though that's the case, I always try to think of one, sometimes two or three very specific people. And I will say, I will actually do this in my office. I will have a conversation with the wall, right? Because as I'm talking it out, I'm starting to think about which parts of this argument or which parts of the public policy piece are the ones that are going to be the most relatable, understandable, and I start to figure out where are the places where I'm going to get bogged down. And so what we do at Kite and Key is that we figure out here's the basics of what you need to know, just what you need to know. And then we provide you with links to all the sources. And you can do this too. So for example, if you are in one of these town hall type situations and you say, okay, you know, here's my conclusion about what we do on the finances here. I learned all about this through these three sources, and I'm going to make this available. If you want, tell me your email and I'll send it to you, because it really, and you demonstrate for this person your expertise. I really had to go to school on this. it took me, a couple days to go through it, and I've got all my sources and I can share them with you because, in other words, what you can do is give a proxy for the information by explaining to them how deep you've gone to get to this conclusion, and by giving them the opportunity then to do it themselves. In this world, very few people will. They're more likely to take you at your word. They'll say, okay, well, those are the links. Those are pretty in-depth, education finance things. So you seem like a trustworthy person. I'm going to go with you. But that's how we do it. We try to think, what's the bare minimum you need to know? And any other additional questions, we're going to give you what you need so that if you have the time, you can then go and find it.
Okay, that's really good. And I love sort of offering people, like, if you want more, I'll give you more. I'll share this information. I think that speaks volumes, right? That you really are trying to exchange facts and not just hammer with your opinion. Okay, speaking of hammering with opinion, I just had one of my friends that's watching text me a question. She said, how do you deal with a situation where someone goes first and they attack you? And I think sadly we're living in a world, right, where it's been modeled right at all levels of media and government. That personal attack has become the norm. Any recommendations for our folks on how to diffuse that without maybe getting steamrolled? I think oftentimes as women, some of us love confrontation. We attorneys in the room, right? And some people that's just the last thing that they want to deal with. So when you're faced with somebody that's taking you on pretty hardcore right at the beginning of a debate or a town hall, or even a one-on-one meeting, how do you suggest you sort of diffuse that without losing sort of your position of strength?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's difficult, and everybody is going to, this is going to happen, right? I think, I was saying a little bit about this before. Right now, there's this misunderstanding, I think, that when you are deeply concerned about something, the only way to explain that to someone is just by being heated and accusatory. And I'm sorry to say, it's going to get worse, not better, as we get into the thick of it for the presidential election. The way that I choose to deal with it all the time is to start with saying, like, I hear you. Like, I hear you, and I can feel, all of us can feel how upset you are. And I'm going to tell you that I share some of that, because, again, you're both there for a reason, right? And you find that commonality. Like, I deeply care about what's going to happen with my children or what's going to happen in our city. And I'm hearing all of your anger, and put a name to it. Like, put a name to those emotions. I hear your anger. I hear your frustration. But I know that we need a solution right now. So you flip it from saying, I hear your emotion, but I also know we need a solution. And that is my purpose here today. I feel it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I feel it too. It's in me too. But my mind is just focused on, how do we get out of this mess? And I really want to talk about that. And if you do that, you put a name to what their behavior was, but do it as generously as you can. And then you point to the fact that you're there to move this forward, you're going to win almost every single time. The worst thing you can do, at least in my estimation, is meet them where they are. Because let me tell you, some people are rhetorically really funny, and they're angry and they're funny. And, you may be able to go toe to toe with that, but you're not going to feel good about what you said afterwards, or you're going to lose. So it is better to try to be, again, keep thinking in your mind, I got to be the adult in the room. And that means acknowledging someone's pain.
Yeah.
Even if I'm mad at them, it's acknowledging it and then moving on to the most productive thing I can do.
I love that, staying productive and positive, even if somebody else isn't. And one thing I heard you say in there, that lately at the Policy Circle, we've been saying sorry, not sorry. Like, we're not going to apologize. We don't even want to use that, right, in that setting. And really just, I hear you, I understand that, and identifying that common ground and solution. I think that's so critical. And I think, one of the things, Sylvie Legere, our co-founder, she has a book and a podcast, and it's Trust Your Voice, Even When It Shakes. And I think sometimes when we have confrontation, your adrenaline will get flowing, and maybe you feel a little shaky. And just, kind of my 2 cents I want to put in here for everybody is, take a minute to take a deep breath, right? And realize that you are sitting in the seat you're sitting in for a reason. and you have value, right? You have something to offer. So no matter what somebody else, what their game is, remember, like you at the beginning, you are a credible, trustworthy person whose heart is in the right place, because most of our policy circle members, they're there because they want to solve problems and they care about their community, their kids, their businesses, their church. And so I just want to encourage everybody that even if you feel shaky and nervous, you have a reason to be there, and just keep pushing through that, because you'll settle in, right? I think, Vanessa, you've probably been in that place too, where you kind of start off and you're anxious, and maybe somebody comes out of the gate and you're angry. That also gets the adrenaline flowing. So I think just kind of remembering, right? We have every right to be sitting right there to make that compelling argument. So I think that's just one thing for us to remember. Okay, I said one more question, but now two came really, really two are so good. Okay, Melinda and Ithaca. The older I get, the more I'm sure my opinion is right. Okay, Melinda, yes. And at the same time as honing our craft of persuasion, how can we best be sure we aren't adverse to being persuaded ourselves? Look at that question.
Yeah,
Vanessa,
love it.
go.
Yeah, hi Melinda. I love it. I love this, and so this is where I get back to my point about acknowledging inconvenient facts. And I think this is so critical, and people do not do this, which is to say, when you're building your argument, you should be doing it. I come from a debate background. I'm a lawyer by training. So this is like instilled in me, but we all have to discipline ourselves into this practice, which is to say, I'm making this case. What are all the objections someone is going to have? And then you run through all those objections and you honestly deal with them in your mind before you go to that argument. When you do that, the very act of doing that is going to educate you so much. And it's okay if by the act of doing that, you say, "Eesh, I'm not sure that the opinion I held is the right one, so I'm going to pull myself out." That's okay too. Not knowing or changing your mind is a sign of growth, right? Like it can be at least a sign of growth. And so you can only do that if you fairly contend with these inconvenient arguments or facts. So in preparing yourself for any debate that you're going to have or a compelling argument you need to make, go through them, write them down, take them super seriously. And if you find that you can't build an argument around why those things don't matter, you'll start to realize they might. And that might be the beginning of changing your mind. But that's all about disciplining yourself in your preparation for that conversation.
I do love that discipline and preparation. And one of the things I encourage our participants, host a conversation using a brief and bring people to the table that they're not all in your echo chamber. Bring people that think differently than you, because if the first time that you hear an opposing viewpoint is when you stand up to present to the school board, that's not good. Having that circle, right, where you can practice engaging and sometimes just getting out of your own head, right, Vanessa? I mean, that's really part of the battle. And I think Melinda's right. We have sort of these little, echo chambers we're in, sources we rely on. It's so good to get outside of that. And even if it doesn't change your mind, you're so much more prepared. I mean, when you're faced in real time with something you maybe haven't heard before, at least you've kind of got some sense of where they're coming from. I don't know. It just seems to me there's a little bit of a lost art in that disciplined preparation. One last question. I promise this is the last one. Jamie Locke, you mentioned establishing legitimacy of your viewpoint. Often our opinions can be dismissed because we aren't like a doctor or PhD. How can we communicate self-education on a topic that still gives us that value and credibility?
Oh, I mean, I love this, right? Because the number one way that I would do it, and this is like so key to Policy Circle, to Kite and Key Media, right, is going back to that evidence piece, which is that you have to combine two things: your lived human experience with the expert's evidence. You don't need to be the person with the PhD. But if you're trying to convince someone, particularly in a professional environment, you do need to know what the PhD said. Right? I mean, it depends on the argument and the topic, right? But the expert said, go and make yourself knowledgeable. You didn't have to be the one that did that research, but you do need to know and kind of understand what that research means. You need to be able to cite it so that you can be very clear. This is not your personal opinion. This is an opinion of somebody who studied this for a long time. Take that and then meld it in an argument about your lived experience, why you have skin in the game, right? Because your human, as important as the evidence is, your human lived experience is critically important too. The problem is people tend to do one or the other. And you get a lot of conversations that are like, I feel, I experienced, I. If it's only that, you're not going to be persuasive, because anybody listening to you is going to be like, well, that was you. It might not be everybody. But if you are combining that with evidence from people who do have that expertise, and then it's demonstrating that you have authority here, you've taken the time to deal and interact with that expertise, that in and of itself will build your authority, and people will listen. For sure. So that's how I would do it. That's why bring your army. Those experts are your army. They work for you in this discussion.
So good. And that is what I think about that discipline of preparing. Don't show up and say, I read this on, Professor Facebook, right? You're out. Everybody will tune you out. So I really encourage everybody to just think about your sources. Again, that's why we hope that you all will utilize Policy Circle briefs as you prepare for these conversations, because they're all open sourced, and they have reliable data. Same thing with Kite and Key. The data that you're going to get in a Kite and Key video, it's vetted carefully. So I think at this point, Vanessa, you have gotten us all ready to go. I'm fired up, and I'm also getting kicked out of the restaurant I'm sitting in right now. So I am going to wrap up, but I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I can't wait to continue to collaborate with you all on policy videos. As we know, we've got a ton of work to do, so we can all be more solutions oriented. But again, grateful for you and Kite and Key.
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope this was helpful. And I hope anyone that's watching this, that you will sign up for a Kite and Key email or follow us on social media. You'll see how much Policy Circle and Kite and Key hold hands. So
wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa. Well, everybody, I'm so grateful for your time. I hope you found this to be a useful workshop. We're going to be conducting these more frequently thanks to the Bowe Stewart Foundation. And I just want to encourage all of you, like we said, think about subscribing to the Policy Circle. You'll get invitations and emails and blogs and videos, and you'll be invited to events like we hosted today. And then, of course, we're always looking for solutions-oriented, civic-minded folks to join us as members. So for $100 a year or $10 a month, you can unlock all 65 Policy Circle briefs and gain access to sort of member-only content and resources. So again, I'm grateful to all of you for all that you do, sewing into your communities. Keep showing up. You deserve a seat at the table.